Hi, guys. Welcome back to another edition of Chats from the Blog Cabin. Today, I am joined by Michelle. She is a mental health advocate. So, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking about mental health?
Perfect. Thank you for having me, Melissa. I'm honored to be here with you. I'm a mental health advocate. Somehow, some way that became a reality for me a few years ago. I spent most of my career in the pharmaceutical industry, but then found myself giving a TED Talk about growing up with my bipolar mom. And then I dealt with depression myself, and it sort of fueled me to go out and be the change to remove stigma and really help there be more compassion for people with invisible disability.
I love that. Let's talk about, first of all, being a child and dealing with a mom who is bipolar. Let's talk about that experience.
Yeah, my mom, I guess she was diagnosed when I was a very little girl. She had the typical signs and symptoms of, bipolar, in that she had mania. She had deep depressing lows. I used to refer to my mom as a roller coaster, sort of holding on for the ride, because you never knew when she was going to be up or down. So it was really hard. I mean, I put a lot of my own needs on the back burner. Everything in our home was revolved around making sure she was okay and she had what she needed. And there were times when my dad just needed me to stay with her because she was too fragile to be left alone, but not sick enough to be hospitalized. So it sort of had me play a role reversal in caring for my mom, and made me grow up real quick.
So are you the only child then?
Yeah. So I had two cousins live with us for a while, but I was their only daughter.
Oh, wow. So the burden of seeing your mom go through her manic stages it's
Yeah.
I mean, I can just imagine as a small child.
But you don't know any different. People say that to me all the time, right? But like, you don't know, what you know, right? No any difference. You do the best you can with what you know. And that was my reality. So it taught me empathy. It taught me a lot of positive qualities, even though it was hard. It taught me a lot. I mean, I could feel her pain. It taught me to make sunshine, when I needed to for myself. It taught me my own coping mechanisms. So it shaped me,
So let's talk about making sunshine for yourself. What did you do? How did you make sunshine for yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I looked to a lot of my friends' mothers and my friends' relationships, to look for like an escape from my home life whenever I could. I also had my youth group. My Catholic youth group was very instrumental in my life. It was a safe haven for me to just be who I was without being judged or a fear of being ridiculed because my mom was sick. And then I just learned to pacify myself. I learned to find ways to bring myself joy. I didn't look to external things to bring me joy. I would find ways to entertain myself and keep myself busy.
Wow. And you wrote about a lot of your experiences in your book, Breaking Into My Life. So let's talk about your book.
Sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I had given a TED Talk about growing up with my mom. I was nominated to do that. And that gave me the confidence. A little girl who didn't really have a voice. It gave this little girl a voice and had me realize the power of storytelling, and that people could see a little bit of themselves when you tell your story. So that was what was the impetus for me writing my book, because I thought, gosh, if I could do that in a 10-minute TED Talk, what could I do if I wrote my book? I could really help people across the world, if in reality. So over a 4-year period, it was incredibly cathartic, but I really worked hard to recreate those experiences of what it's like to care for someone with a mental illness, because I thought if I could humanize it for people, then maybe they won't fear it or judge it. They'll just find compassion for those who suffer. And that was my goal.
So let's talk about the stigma around mental illness. Why is it not normalized? Because everybody basically has to deal, or some way, shape, or form, deal with some sort of mental illness. So why is it considered like the hush hush topic that nobody wants to talk about?
Isn't it amazing? It's so unfortunate. The brain is just another organ, yet we relate to it as something that we need to be embarrassed about if it needs support. It's so unfortunate that that's the case, but it also comes from history, right? Generations before us had, when I was a little girl, my mom was sick. Like, I didn't want anyone to know. Like, it was so much worse then than it is now. Even there's embarrassment, there's shame, and there's fear. And like, even how they dealt with the treatment of mental illness years and years ago was just horrific. So I think that sort of is passed down generation to generation, and it's all about our own relationship to mental illness. So if you didn't grow up in my home knowing what it was, you might have a relationship to mental illness as a crazy person, in a shooting, God forbid, and that all paints a picture and creates fear and creates, unfortunately, ignorance. You only know what you know. So I think with more and more celebrities and athletes speaking up and shining a light on it and sharing their own vulnerable experiences, it can really normalize it and have people start to be like, it's no big deal for me to mention if I'm not feeling well. It's no big deal for me to, share that I'm having a bad day. Like, I'm a human being. So I think we're on a really good path. I think the pandemic has shined an even brighter light on mental illness because we're all, as human beings, we're not meant to be quarantined and away from connection to other human beings. So it's all really putting us under a lot of pressure. So I'm optimistic, but it's still a very real thing that stigma does exist.
So you brought it in about COVID and the workplace. Like, a lot of people, like the mental health and the culture, because we're isolated now, we're working from home, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's talk about how we can deal with the mental health, our mental health during COVID.
Yeah, I have a very powerful resilience program that I feel very blessed to have been delivering to my corporate clients and even educators over the course of the past 9 months. I've been delivering this program to really just remind people they need to check in with how they're doing. They need to not step over how they're feeling. How they're feeling mentally is just as important as if you wake up in the morning with a backache. You should acknowledge it. You should talk about it. You should lean on each other for support. But that first step is so critical, and that's the self-awareness of how am I really doing. And in that program, the most important message I have is to give yourself grace. We're all living through a pandemic, and it is triggering us and reminding us of past traumas that we've dealt with, and we're all navigating it to the best of our ability in our own unique way. So I think it's really important that people understand that it's okay to not have a good day. It's okay to have a bad day. And in that program, I'm also out to empower them on things that they can do. What can you do every day to feel better? What can you do in your immediate workspace? What can you do? Well, there's simple things that people can do, and they don't realize it, to really help them feel energized and motivated and inspired. I'm on a mission to really help organizations get it that people are struggling right now, and they really do need to care more for their people's well-being.
So you said you gave some simple tips. Can you give us a few tips about how we can do to make ourselves feel better?
Exactly. There's a lot of things, but I'll give you this one. Look around your workspace. You have a beautiful space there. I can see with your setup. It's gorgeous. Really look at what you're smelling, what you're looking at every day, and what you're hearing. So you can change the energy in your workspace by maybe getting a diffuser and putting some peppermint oil in and smelling the peppermint. Maybe looking at a beautiful painting on the wall right above your computer that brings you joy and makes you smile. Maybe it's a photo of your child. I don't know, but have something that you're looking at. And then what are you listening to? Maybe having some soft music or some music that you love playing in the background. If you play to the senses and just change those three things, you can reinvigorate your day, just how you're navigating it and how you feel.
Yeah, I will say I'm a firm believer in the environment around you, because when I used to work inside the house, I mean, I'm in my what I call blog cabin, which is like a she shed 50 yards from my back door, but I'm not dealing with the clutter inside the house, and it just makes me want to come in here and spend the time that I'm in here energized and working. So
Love
I
it.
so can do that. I so understand that. So you mentioned in one of your bio things, it says a lot of companies don't realize that when they invest like $1 in the mental health in the workplace, they have like a $3 or $5 return back on that $1. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah. Engagement is everything. And it's real easy for employees right now to not be feeling motivated or engaged. They're home. They're probably wearing multiple hats, caring for children, trying to navigate their day. I mean, engagement and disability costs impact the bottom line. Let's face it. If employees are feeling good, they're feeling empowered, and they're engaged in their jobs. It's so important that employers do spend the money. And I'm saying beyond an 800 hotline for crisis, right? That's a crisis, right? And employees might be leery to be picking that up because what if their boss finds out? So what is so important for employers to be thinking about is what else can I be doing to help bridge the conversation about mental health? What's your culture like? Is it a common conversation to talk about wellness, mental wellness, or is it something that you step over or you don't even acknowledge? Companies pay tons of money to EAP hotlines that go underutilized. So, you really need to stop and look at your culture and say, what are we doing? And what kind of relationship do people leaders have with their people? And are they genuinely checking in on them? Because I'll tell you, the average employee might be saying they're fine, but really they're just trying to navigate it the best they can, and they're not going to divulge that. So,
do you think one of the reasons why they're not divulging that they're not fine is because that stigma around the mental health?
I think so. And I think that they think that they'll be perceived as less than or weak. And they should just, tough it up and keep going. Yeah. And it also has a lot to do with the culture. Like, what is the culture like? I mean, I had a horrible experience when I was diagnosed with depression, because I was diagnosed with depression, and I told my boss, and a few months after I told her, she evaluated me in my performance review and said, "You didn't bring your bubbly, upbeat self to work." I mean, how insensitive of a leader is that to say that to me after I told her I was diagnosed with depression and I was really just, doing the best I could. I was getting treatment. I mean, those are the types of trainings and sensitivities that leaders need to be aware of. That's the last thing you tell someone who's been diagnosed with depression,
Was it to the case that they probably she's diagnosed with depression? Oh, that's just something that they're just saying right now. Did they not really believe that you were diagnosed with depression?
I don't know. I don't know, but I think when we start evaluating people on their bubbliness, we get into a space that's not necessarily the most professional. So I don't know. I mean, I think it reflected more on her inability to have compassion for human beings. And it seems so basic, but I think we need to do a better job teaching compassion and empathy. People are human beings before they're an employee number.
Speaking of compassion, you also have a program, 5 Steps to Cultivating a Culture of Compassion. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So on my website, michelledickinson.com, I do have 5 steps to cultivating a workplace of compassion, because when I was at my former company, we were working on creating more compassion in the workplace. And I witnessed some of the things that were working and some of the things that just did not work at all. So on my website, I have quite a few things. I mean, it starts with what's the tone that the leader is setting in the organization? Is the leader open about talking about mental health? It's so powerful when you have someone from the C-suite openly discussing maybe a mental health challenge that has affected their life. And it doesn't have to be them. It could just be a spouse or a loved one who went through something. It really has the power to normalize it and not think that there's something wrong with you. If you're like, God, my leader navigated this, like I can certainly navigate it. Like they're human like me. There's that. There's employee resource groups that can be built. I was part of a leadership team driving a mental health employee resource group that really just was a safe space for people affected by mental health to come together and to support one another. There's all kinds of trainings that can happen, you know, from, like I mentioned, the leader that I had, teaching empathy and compassion, teaching how to listen. How about just really listening, empathetic listening, and building trust. Trust is such an important aspect of any professional relationship that needs to be cultivated ongoing. So yeah, and even having platforms, like speaking platforms, you know, having a roundtable discussion, having different people with different experiences speak up. When I gave my TED Talk on my company TED platform, people crawled out of the woodwork and could relate to me, and for the first time felt comfortable talking about what had affected them. So there's power in that. And when you have an employee who has navigated depression and come out the other side, that employee is a beacon of hope for other employees. So never underestimate the power of your own environment, your own people helping other people. It's a beautiful thing.
Now, two questions arose while you were talking. One is, what is empathetic listening? How is it different from regular listening? Because I know a lot of people are like, empathetic listening. I listen all the time.
Yeah.
What is that?
Oftentimes we're listening to reply, right? Oftentimes we're listening to figure out how you relate to that and what your solution is, instead of just genuinely being present and fully listening to the person, fully like allowing your listening to just be present and not being so concerned about what you're going to say next, but really getting into their world, like really stepping into and understanding what it might feel like for them. We go through life and oftentimes we don't feel heard or acknowledged. That can be the easiest and the most important gift we can give another human being, is to just genuinely hear them.
I love that. Now let's talk about your struggle with depression. When were you diagnosed and your journey through it all?
Yeah, you know, Melissa, I was adopted. So I went through my life going, well, thank goodness I'm not going to have that bipolar gene that my mom has, right? Like, I didn't think I would ever deal with it. But a few years ago, when I was going through a divorce of a marriage, I actually didn't expect it to hit me like it did, but it did. And it made me realize life events happen to us all the time and nobody's immune to it. Because as much as I thought I was a strong person, I honestly just had no clue. And so fortunately for me, I was very comfortable with asking for help. I had a therapist all my life because of my mom's illness. So I reached out and I got support, and I was diagnosed with depression, and it was hard. It was something that I never knew what it felt like for my mom until I experienced that. And I remember asking my doctor for medication. I said to him, you know, will you give me medication? This is really painful. And he said, I want you to find a vice that you can grab onto, a healthy vice, and not take medicine right now. And so I said, okay. And I started to train for a triathlon, and I poured all of my energy into training. And that really did help me. It gave me momentum to spill over into other areas of my life. And that was the greatest gift I could do. So yeah, so it was hard. I still deal with seasonal depression here in New Jersey right now. It's very gray and cold, but I'm doing okay.
Wow. I mean, why do you think, because you were in the pharmaceutical field, that you said, give me medication first before you even thought about a healthy vice?
Yeah, I wanted it to go away. I think we live in a society where it's easy to ask for a pill or ask for some type of relief, but I'm so glad that he didn't. I'm so glad that he challenged me to find other ways to navigate it. And fitness became everything for me. Because when I was exercising, I wanted to eat better, and everything just sort of worked out. And I'm telling you, the most amazing thing for me was the momentum. Like it felt like nothing was going good in my life, my job, my marriage, everything was falling to crap. And grabbing onto my health and my fitness was the momentum that helped me navigate those other areas. So if I had any advice for someone who might be struggling, find that one thing that you love and just grab onto it and get some momentum going in your life.
Wow. I mean, are you still as involved in health and fitness as you were when you first were diagnosed?
I exercise. I think this pandemic has challenged us all a little bit, right? Like my races this past summer were canceled. So, I try to get to the gym now and then. It's not fun to exercise with a mask. So I have a bike that I ride. So I'm active, probably not as much as I would like to be because of the pandemic, but I still keep moving because I know that makes me feel better. The endorphin high from exercise truly does help me, truly does.
So now that you brought up the pandemic again, let's talk about the mental health issues with the pandemic, because people that are thought they were okay otherwise, now the pandemic is we're isolated. We're not able to go out. If we're going out, we're getting a mask. We're not able to get that alone time because a lot of parents right now are struggling with doing the virtual schooling and having their kids around all the time, not getting that break. So what do you suggest for them?
It's scary. The CDC says that 1 in 3 people in the U.S. are dealing with depression or anxiety due to the pandemic. 1 in 3. That statistic is terrifying. So the reality is so many of us are dealing with it the best that we know how. But what scares me is now post the holidays, the depression rates it's anticipated depression rates are going to go up. Unfortunately, suicide rates they're predicting are going to go up, and I think the one thing that if I could say anything is the connection and the communication have to be a priority. It's so easy to kind of crawl into your hole and forget about the world, but the connection and the communication and whatever you're feeling in your head, getting it out and verbalizing it can make all the difference. So, when you're struggling right now, it's so important to find a trusted friend, someone you can talk to and get out of your head and talk to someone. That's going to help you. And you're probably going to, in the process, help other people by being vulnerable and just admitting what you're dealing with.
I will say that what's helped me during COVID is I actually started these chats from the blog cabin at the very beginning of COVID because I missed that connection and missed talking to people. And so I think even though it's electronically and it's through technology, I still think you should reach out to people as well that way. Absolutely.
Seeing someone's eyes, connecting with them is so important. It's so important for our joy, for our fulfillment. We're social creatures by nature as human beings, so we have to find a way to stay connected.
Yeah, we do have a comment. Domestic violence and child abuse rates increased during the pandemic as well. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, the people that are at home right now that are dealing with domestic abuse or child abuse. How do they get through it?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's so horrible to think about that's going on. But the strain and the stress, I guess, is affecting a lot of people in very weird ways. It's easier said than done when people have no place to go. But again, it's all about talking to someone about it, even if it's calling a helpline or even if it's getting in your car and going for a drive and calling a loved one. Nobody should have to deal with abuse. Nobody should have to deal with any kind of pain like that. But you have to have the courage to raise your hand and get support, though, and call someone and talk to someone. You have to have a loved one or a friend or someone who would want to support you. It's just, I've been hearing about those statistics and it's not right,
They say the strongest thing that you can do if you're suffering from a mental illness is to ask for help. Why do people not ask for help? Do they think it's because that stigma around it, like they're going to be categorized as, oh, she has a mental illness, or she's not right because she's has a mental illness? Or
I'm all about preventing the crisis, right? So if we if we have a healthy relationship to the brain and we recognize that, maybe it's not that we're mentally well or mentally sick, maybe it's a continuum that we just glide along, and some days we're good and some days we're not good. And how about we relate to it that way? And how about we consider having a therapist that we know before the crisis? So you can talk to them proactively. Like, don't let it go to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to talk to someone. How about getting comfortable with the idea of maybe I just should just go and just, make sure I have a relationship with someone. God forbid if I ever needed someone. Or maybe I just need to talk to someone and just about, how hard life is right now during this pandemic. It's okay. It's okay to talk to people. And I think I wish more people would start to recognize the value of proactive care of your brain, just like you go to the gym and you work out your physical body. Like, what are you doing to proactively work out and navigate how you're feeling and your emotions?
Wow. You also have a youth program.
Yes.
It's called Perfect Just the Way You Are. So let's talk about that.
Sure. It's a wellness program. It was born out of some of the challenges in my own childhood. Like, I didn't have a mom who was able to actively be engaged in my life because she was so sick. So when I thought about it, I thought, how many kids out there don't realize they're perfect, whole, and complete just as they are, because maybe their mom is absent, or maybe they just don't have that in their home. So that's really what the program was named for, was to remind kids of their greatness and their limitless potential. It focuses on how to nourish the body, how to nourish the mind, and leadership skills, those three components. And it's really designed to have kids love themselves and understand empathy and compassion for themselves and for each other through a series of activities and interactions that they do together. So it's a lot of fun, and it's all about bolstering self-esteem and having them present to their greatness.
So do you think having to deal with your mom's bipolar illness when you were a kid has made you a better empathetic listener and a better person to create these programs because you're pulling from personal experiences?
I think so. I mean, I think that, I have this desire to make a difference in the world because I saw the suffering of my mom. I felt the loneliness of being a little girl without a mom who really was there for me. Even though I knew she loved me, she wasn't there for me. So maybe those two pieces of it help me really relate to the topics more and have this burning desire to want to make a difference for other people so that they don't suffer. I think at the end of the day, the suffering factor, witnessing my mother suffer, feeling isolated and alone as a little girl, those two pieces, if I could prevent that for someone else, then that makes me happy.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that you were adopted. So that has its own set of mental health issues there. So how did you deal with that? Was it very well known that you were adopted from the very beginning, or?
Yeah, my parents were good about that. They always wanted me to know that I was adopted. So I was very comfortable with the term. But when I had dark moments with my adopted mom, I always wondered, why wasn't I with my mom? I shouldn't be here. There's been a mistake. I should be with that other mom, right? And then when I got older, my father gave me the information to find my birth mom. He wanted me to know where I came from. And so I found her and I was reunited with her. And, and her story was that she was 16 years old when she gave birth to me. But thank God she gave birth to me. She could have made a million other choices, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a beautiful reunion to meet her and see her and get that closure and understand why, At the end of the day, I'm blessed that I had two women that loved me more than anything.
I love that. I just actually recently interviewed someone that said that when they adopted their child, because they had fostered their daughter, and they adopted her, and the biological mom is still in the picture. She said when they adopted, it didn't become a family tree; it became an orchard. That means that because they wanted to make it as normalized as possible for adoption. Why do you think a lot of people are like, oh, well, your mom didn't want you like when you're adopted. That type
Yeah.
of those kids, kids can be very
I
cool.
know. Oh, I heard it all. Of course. I don't know. I think it's God, I think adoption's such a beautiful thing. I mean, I look at so many of my friends who've adopted children from all over, and there's so much love in the world, like I don't know why. There's just so much love and so much available. The human spirit and the human spirit has the capacity to love. So why would we not want there to be love given to every child in every circumstance? I don't know. I think, I go back to ignorance. Being an adopted daughter, like there's nothing more beautiful than taking in a beautiful little life and giving them a better chance. I mean, my parents did. My biological mother was definitely below the poverty line. So, I'm blessed in many ways, even though my mom was bipolar.
So why did you decide to share your story? Because I'm throwing up a quote right now. A comment. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Why did you decide to say, I'm going to start talking about this and I'm going to make it normalized?
Yeah, I think, for many, many years, I didn't talk about my mom's illness. I just sort of was like, oh, look, I did it. I became something in the world. Everyone thought I would never become something because of everything I dealt with. So I thought that was a victory, right? That I got a job and I was contributing member to society. That was a win. But I think it was when I gave my TED Talk and I just realized the power of storytelling and how we need more storytellers. We need more people to go first. We need people with courage who are willing to be vulnerable and be raw, because it pulls at the human nature of us all. And then we see threads of ourselves in other people's stories. And I think that, seeing that and then having the confidence that my voice mattered, it just was like, it's a no-brainer. I have to write this memoir and I have to use it to be the change I want to see in the world. I mean, if I want more compassion, I have to lead it. I have to be the one that has no problem telling my story.
Now, I originally started these chats from the blog cabin doing all these different topics, but it wasn't until my middle daughter, who I shared with you, came up to me and said, Mom, I want you to do a conversation about mental health and how we can the alternatives to, instead of pharmaceuticals, alternatives that you can do for mental health. And she came on the panel and she started telling everybody about her mental health journey and how she has the bipolar tendencies, which she actually came out in front of everybody. And I could not be more proud at that moment of her when she came out and talked about her own struggle as mental health. So it definitely takes someone of courage to get up and start talking.
It's also cathartic. I mean, for me, when I wrote my memoir, it took me, like I said, it took me 4 long years and it was painful. I had a writing coach who was a gift from God. She doubled as a therapist at times, but like incredibly cathartic to relive and to talk through those emotions. And even like in this conversation, like I'm talking to you about it, of course it's like getting me like present to everything I did endure, but grateful, so in serving, there's a saying, in serving others, we serve ourselves as well, something like that. And I believe that if you are out to help others, the byproduct is you're probably going to help yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And that's honestly the reason why whenever I can find someone that comes out and talks about mental health and about their own journey, I want to have them on, because I want people to know that they're okay, that if you're struggling, it's okay. There's other people out there that struggle as well.
Yeah. And give them permission. I mean, my biggest thing is I want to give you permission to be okay with not being okay. And I want to remind you to give yourself grace. Grace is something we all need to be giving ourselves right now. This pandemic has been long. It has been hard. It has not been easy. And so, the first step is we got to give ourselves grace.
Yeah. So what are some of the steps to give ourselves grace, since you talked about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just acknowledging where you are. And if you need to do something for yourself, be okay with it. It also means protecting your energy. If you have a friend who's a drain on you, maybe taking a pause from that friend for a day or two to reclaim your energy. It's loving yourself, whatever that looks like. Is it a bubble bath? Is it a book on the couch for the day? It might be, but you have to nurture yourself. You have to care for yourself. And you should not feel guilty about doing that.
Yeah, I so can understand about, you were talking about a friend that is a drain on you. I had a friend, unfortunately, who's no longer my friend because she didn't see that I needed space from her own health issues for my own mental health, and she just couldn't understand that. So, but yeah, you have to take space because then you realize their energy is going to drag you down even more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then you can't serve those that you love, right? Like if it is compromising you, it's going to affect those around you that you're immediately interacting with, whether it's your partner or your children. So yeah, you have to protect your energy. And it's also recognizing it's okay to be frustrated that you can't live the life that you want to be living right now. It's okay. Like, how many of us want to get on a plane and go someplace? How many of us just want to get together with our loved ones and have a glass of wine? Like, we can't do that stuff. And so it's okay to be angry and to be upset with that, and acknowledge it, mourn it for what it is, but also recognize this is temporary. This is not going to go on forever. And contrast is a gift, and imagine how much more we're going to appreciate it when we get to the other side.
That is so true. Now, looking ahead to 2021, what do you, people are like, I don't have any expectations for 2021 because 2020, this COVID pandemic and mental health. So what would you say for people that don't have any expectations for 2021?
I think we are in the most incredible time in terms of opportunities. I have to say, you have to start to look at, I know it's been hard for a lot of people. There's been a lot of hardship, but within all of this, there's opportunities everywhere. So I would say constantly be looking for the opportunities, because there are opportunities that are going to present that you would have never thought of. Life as we know it is no longer. So find what opportunities exist. But then I would also say, this time has given us all an opportunity to reflect on what really matters. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to get present to what you really love to do. And maybe that's where your energy should be going. Instead of working for someone else and making someone else successful, maybe there's something within you that says, I need to follow what's gonna light my heart on fire. So it could be an awesome opportunity to pursue dreams and goals and fulfillment that you maybe never would have had the courage to because you were on the hamster wheel.
I so can get that, because actually I had huge anxiety about being in front of the camera and talking live. I hated that. And then out of COVID, this Chats from the Blog Cabin happened. So
yes.
I can understand that. I had to push myself outside of my comfort zone. But now I'm to the point where I love interacting and interviewing people and meeting new people and learning their stories. I love that.
And you're good at it. See that?
Thank you. Now, is there anything else you want to share with us?
I think if anyone was to want, if I wanted you to know one thing about me, that is that I'm a stand in the world for there to be more compassion and more empathy for people with invisible disabilities. And I want to be the source of that. So I'm real excited to keep working with different organizations that want to create more open dialogue and help their people get comfortable getting the help they need through the work that I'm doing. That, and then never underestimate the power of asking someone how they're doing. It takes such a little bit of effort, but check in on the ones that you even think are strong and they're fine. Really reaching out to people that you love and really checking in and saying, how are you doing? I was thinking about you. And even if they say they're fine, they're going to remember you if they ever need to connect with someone, that you were the person that asked them how they were doing.
I love that. Now, I'm writing down a note. Never underestimate the power of asking someone how you're doing. I love that.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
On my website is probably the best place. It's Michelle E. Dickinson, Fairly, Dickinson. You can follow me there. I have my own series, Michelle's Conversations That Matter, where I highlight different stories about mental health. I bring in experts and storytellers so we can have this be a very common, normal conversation. You can follow me on Instagram and, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Or I just posted a survey as well. I'm looking to get employee feedback on how their companies are treating them, how they're doing, how are they feeling supported? And that's a report that I'm pulling together based on that survey data. So you can reach out to me through my website, and I'd love to hear from you.
Michelle, I want to thank you for coming on and chatting about mental health and making it normalized in in the world, in the country. It's not just the United States, it's in the country. Which brings me to another thing, just real quick. How is in your studies and in your research, how is the United States as far as other countries in the world with mental health? Are the other countries in the world more receptive to mental health issues than the United States? Or
yeah, over the years, I've been involved with different advocacy groups and different mental health communities. I've learned that Canada and Australia lead the way. They're really doing a lot for their citizens around mental health. They definitely are countries that we can learn from here in the U.S. But we're doing okay. We have a long way to go. But then you compare the U.S. to countries like India, they have a lot further way to go, right? So I think we're doing okay, and I think we can do better. But I don't want to diminish the progress that we have made.
Yeah, because I know my husband's from Mexico, and so there's that stigma in Mexico that you don't talk about that type of thing. And it's not something that you talk about. Where in the United States, they're a little bit more open with their feelings. So,
well, that's a culture, the whole machismo, right? Like I did a whole series on men's mental health. I mean, we need our men to be talking. You're right. And men typically, and especially in other countries, are groomed to just not admit and just deal with it. And unfortunately, we lose our men to suicide because they don't talk. So we got to do more for our men, and we got to make sure they know that they're cared for and that it's okay for them to talk if they need support.
Yeah. And I'd love that. I mean, not only check in on your women friends, but your men friends as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So is there anything before we jump off that you want to wrap up with?
No, thank you so much for having me. I think we all have a part in this. So if we all start to normalize it, if we have the courage to go first and just ask someone how they're feeling, or just admit that like you're not having a good day, you set the tone and you can cause a ripple effect by normalizing it and being like, okay, so today's not a good day. How are you?
Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah.
And Michelle, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about mental health, because we still have a long way to go, like you said. But we're getting there step by step. And the more people share their stories and come on and talk about what's normal for them, which may not be normal for the next person, that's when we normalize mental health issues.
Yes. Thank you for having me, Melissa.
You're welcome. And guys, we will see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin.